All right, so I'm Brian Dempsey. Right here, I got Shane Greene, and most of you guys know it as Shane Greene as the big leaguer, maybe the 2019 All Star, but I know him as Shane Greene from the South Lake Little League Cardinals. So, man, Shane, what do you got?
What's up, everybody? Shane Greene here. Known Brian for a long time. Excited to work together here and give you guys as much information as possible.
So, man, just want to kind of bounce into right here. So, for our organization, we kind of just started sending out some newsletters and some education, right? Because I think we'd all agree that everybody, we could all go back to our former self. There's some things we would tell ourselves,
For
right?
sure.
Nowadays, more than ever, kids got so many opportunities, and there's so much information out there, and information that you don't know what to do with that can be toxic,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, we wanted to just start off general, and man, the first thing we wrote about was like, play better, right?
Yeah.
That's forever and always the answer to all your problems, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, coming up through the minor leagues and whatnot, life isn't always as good as it looks from the outside looking in. And one of the things we used to always say was, if you don't like it, play better. And it's true, man. A lot of times these excuses or whatever it is that you're coming up with, if you would just play better, you wouldn't even have the same conversation. So focusing on what you can control is most important.
so now everybody hears that stuff all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing new to them, right? So I'm actually going to fast forward into like something that we are going to send out to follow up on that is I call it the opportunity fallacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's go back to, all right, we're in high school, right? And I kind of told everyone your story in about 5 sentences,
Yeah.
which is a little wild to do,
Yeah.
right? But basically, I just told them that your job, your sophomore year, your sophomore year of high school, was to rake the mound, right? Am I fabricating at all?
No, my sophomore year in high school, I made the varsity team. I was told pretty much straight up I'm not going to play. I was told to take pride in the field and shadowing Stephen Batman at the time, who was our quarterback, our ace pitcher. And so that's what I did. When he was pitching, I had to do the chart and chart his pitches. And then when he wasn't pitching, whatever he was doing, I was doing. If he had a 5 mile run because he pitched yesterday, I was running 5 miles. If he had a bullpen, I was throwing a bullpen. Like, I literally just did everything that he did the whole season. And I think I logged a couple innings on JV. They sent me down there basically to like get some work, but I don't even really have those memories. So I don't know if they went good or bad or what, but I went down there a couple times. But at the end of the day, I was there to, I guess, learn and shadow and be a sponge.
All right. So, and then I told him fast forward to your junior year, and you threw about 17 innings that year.
Yeah.
And really, the only reason you pitched was because Steven got hurt.
Yeah, well, your memory is way better than mine, so you can probably go into more detail than I can. But yeah, junior year, I got an opportunity to play, and when I got the opportunity, I played really, really well.
And so that's the thing, right? Is the thing that we hear all the time from parents, kids, right? Because they only know what they know, right?
Yeah.
And their vantage point, which is super limited, is like, well, if I only got an opportunity, if I only got a chance to play, and we
Yeah.
tell them that like you get an opportunity every day in this thing called practice,
Yeah.
right? So like you performed well. What would you attest that to? Because is that the first time you got an opportunity?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's the first time, but at the time, I don't, like, at that moment in my life, I don't think I could have pointed a finger at what we're discussing as being, the process and then the result. Later on, I learned, now looking back, it was just preparation meeting opportunity, right? Where, like, I never really complained about my playing time. I just worked hard. Like, to be honest, me and a couple of my friends, like the Ungers of the world, we would say things like, yo, if you do that, you'll go to the big leagues. And it could have been eat a grasshopper, and I'm going to eat that grasshopper just in case I'm really going to, you know what I mean? So that thought process also led into work. I stayed after practice and ran extra poles so that when I was running poles in front of the coach, I could outdo the people that I was competing against because I put in extra work behind the scenes,
And like
or
you
whatever
said,
it may be. Looking back now, it's easy for me to see that that's what it was. But when I was in the moment, I was just working hard and doing what I was told, really.
so that goes to another like just kind of cliche, but obviously like a very true thing that's said in sports is be where your feet are. And that's where
Yeah,
you were, right?
for
Like
sure.
your opportunity now looking in hindsight, your sophomore year and halfway through your junior year. So that, year and a half, 18 months, your opportunity was to learn how to prepare for when you get the game opportunity, right? And that's when you had some success, right?
Right.
And it's like we speed that up, right? is like then your senior year, people think, oh well, then it was your time, right? Like you weren't even the ace then either.
No, I wasn't that good. I
Yeah.
had one college offer, and I think personally that it was like a favor
Yeah, right. And here's the
because
thing:
my
when
coach
did that
knew
college offer happen?
last minute.
After you graduated from high school,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So this is where like for us back then, it was easier for us to like be like, look at those, be where our feet are, because we didn't
Yeah.
have as many distractions, right? So
Yeah,
there's
for sure.
opportunities, and with opportunities come a certain level of responsibility, right? Those two should be concurrent. And
Yeah.
for me, that's where I think the gap is in our society is that we have more opportunities than ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we were like, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't all these things, right? And I'm not saying those things are bad. There's opportunities, but so there should be a responsibility that comes along with it. And I can tell you firsthand, you knew who I was, right? I knew everybody we played against, right? Like I knew who it was.
Yeah,
I
still
had
do.
I had the scouting
Yeah,
report,
you
right? I
still
still
got it.
remember all
Yeah.
the numbers, all that. For me, back then, like I wouldn't have been able, I would have gotten swallowed by this stuff because the distractions would have been all over the place. The Twitter,
Yeah.
those are things that I don't think I would have been responsible enough to be able to handle and to keep what was really important, which was just being where my feet are and
Right.
competing like under control. And that's what these kids with more opportunity, which is great, there has to be that responsibility that they're not getting caught up in the distractions and that they start viewing like an opportunity to prepare for when I get an opportunity in the game is an opportunity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, I think that, like trying to put myself in my shoes when I was in high school and like thinking about what my brain was doing. Like, I wasn't very distracted by much, like, of course my dream was to play in the big leagues, but it was never a real thought. I was never really that good. I didn't throw hard even when I was a senior in high school. I was throwing, 84 or something? 80. I think I topped out at 86, like topped out at 86.
Pitching at 8, 2 to 4.
Yeah,
right?
so like I was never the guy, but I was always a bad loser. Like I never wanted to lose in anything, so I was always competing, whether it was on the baseball field or anything else, So for me, I think that like I had this little bit of factor like deep in the back of my head somewhere where I stressed out a lot, and I think one of the things that helped me with my stress levels was like thinking that I outworked everybody. So then if I suck, well, at least I did everything.
You won in something, right?
Yeah, like even if I suck, I can sleep at night because like I couldn't have done anything else.
Yeah.
There's no like question marks, and if I'm not good enough, then I'm not good enough, but it's not going to be because I didn't work hard enough, like
Yeah.
And that like looking back now, I was already doing it even though I didn't understand it. I was just lucky enough to like my brain function that way. And I think that something that kids and parents need to understand is like now we understand that that's what it was, right? When we were there, we didn't understand that that's what was going on, but now we understand that.
But it's also because you weren't distracted by other things.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
but we're just trying to bring it to light now so that people
Yeah,
understand
for
that
sure.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like we didn't know what it was when we were doing it, but we were doing it, and now we understand what it is. So we're trying to help the people that don't understand at an earlier age, so it doesn't take 10 more years to figure that part out.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like that's what we want to give back and do, right? Like we could go back and talk to our former selves. Now these kids are our former
Yeah,
selves that we're
100%,
talking to.
100%.
And it's even not only is that just like the right thing to do to kind of give back for what the game's done to you and the people's done, but it's actually like not even just like a luxury anymore like it was for us. It's a necessity because they have more opportunities. They need this responsibility right now,
Well, it's
or
going to
they end up
separate
crumbling.
It's going to separate them,
Yeah.
right? Because there's probably more kids playing the game now than ever with all the travel balls and the whatevers. There's more information available to players now than we ever had, So, like, what's the separator now? Well, in my opinion, the separator now, just from being around the high school practice that I've been going to every day, like, the kids are good. Sophomores to seniors, they all can play.
But they're
separator-
more talented than we were.
Exactly.
Right? But the difference is
separation is in between the years.
we were tougher than that.
Exactly.
That was the difference. And once again, and it's not patting ourselves in the back. It's just it is what it is. We'd already said they're actually more talented than us, right? And that's the
100%.
thing is like I think back on like my senior year, your junior year, right? And I think back on the guys that we played with. And we were talented enough to play with the most talented guys. We wouldn't have been the most talented.
No,
but the
but
difference
we were
was
tough.
the difference was I remember being on the mound and, I didn't really hear anything, right? Because you're locked in, you're in your
Yeah.
zone, right? And like, I remember JT Saporito in center field talking trash to the hitter, that telling him that I'm about to strike him out. So you know what I'm saying? Like from center field, like on certain things. And it was just like, it was just this feel and this mindset of like we were just dogs that were like on attack mode, right? And it didn't matter if we knew who we were playing, we didn't know who we were playing. It didn't matter, right? Like we didn't think about like, hey, you know, how hard am I throwing, any of that stuff. It was just like, yo, I'm just trying to beat you.
We're gonna beat you, and I think that part of that was ingrained in us as a team based off of like what we went through. You know, like there was no knock on our coaches, but there was less coaching and more like make these guys tough. That's just the way it was back then.
Here's the thing,
and before us, like just our parents' generation, like that's probably all it was just make them tough and let them play.
And that's also here's the thing, right? Like the definition of a coach should be to get the most out of your players.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, you know, not only thinking back on the guys that I played for, but then also on the, you know, my time coaching and the coaches I've been around and seen, has been like some of the best coaches that I've been around, if we call by definition of a coach of getting the most out of your players or your team, okay, haven't been like the smartest or best even baseball guys, right? Because at the end of the day, like especially nowadays, like we are more knowledgeable about the game of baseball than ever. It's phenomenal. It's great. The game has grown and has continued to get better. However, right, like why is there still a gap, right? It's just a different gap. And the gap is that we have extremely talented players, but they don't know how to compete. They don't know how to control their emotions, right? They don't know how to be that controlled dog, right, on the field, right? So it's like we find that blend of the old school, right, and this new school, right? We take the tech and the metrics, the data, all that stuff's important, the incredibly talented players that we have at such a young age, and then you mix that with the guys of old, of the dogs, and now it's like, now the game's going to get even better, right? And I think that's what it is. I don't think that the game has gotten, you know, into a point to where it's not as good. It's just different, right? And it's better in some ways, and it's like anything. There are some things that are timeless, right? And then there's new things that become timeless. And I think some of the ways on how people train and how we evaluate some things is the new timeless, but we need to also make sure we don't lose inside of it. The two aren't mutually exclusive, right? Like you can have the data, the metrics, all those things, the way we analyze some things, and still be, you know, guys that are, you know, eating dirt, right? You know what I'm saying? You can have both of those.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you know, I'm an analogy guy, and I just came up with this off the top of my head, so stay with me here. But I think that all the analytic stuff is just tools, right? So like people have been cooking meat for a long time, but they used to cook it over an open fire, maybe with no kind of pot or nothing, and now I can just cook it in an air fryer in my house.
Well, you got the green egg.
You know what I mean? But it's the same piece of meat. It's the same meal, but we're cooking it different. Like it's the same evolution, and it's never going to stop.
There's more techniques, and those techniques are just adding to a menu, right? And it's not about replacing something on the menu from time, right? No. Let me kind of shift back a little more to you a little bit, right? And I tell this story all the time. This is like the big story that I tell, you know, the players that I've been able to coach for the last 10 plus years, is that, man, I tell everyone that you are the ultimate. That's the reason why you're in the big leagues. And what I mean by you are the ultimate is you weren't our best player, right? Like you were far from our best player, right? Because people were like, oh, you played with Shane Greene in high school. You guys are probably nasty. I'm like, yeah, we were, but it wasn't because of him, right? You know, like, and you're here to say it, right? And it's just like, but like you are the ultimate everything else. You're the ultimate teammate, right? You are the ultimate, like, bought in, like, ultimate worker, all those things. And my example to show them that is that I remember my senior year, right? Like, I kind of took over the ace role, right? You know, I was throwing really, really well, and Steven kind of was on the shelf a little bit, right? Kind of going through some stuff. And, you know, everybody knows, right? Like, we're at a home game. I'm ready to start the game, right? And, you know, nobody talks to the starting pitcher before we start, right? You know, Dave, our head coach, looks at me and says, you know, Demps, you ready? I said, yep. Let the announcer guys start going on. And you come over to me and you're just like, yo, I got to talk to you. And I'm like, dude, I'm about to pitch. Like, talk to me later. It ain't important. You're like, no, I got to. Finally, I was just like, all right, dude, what is it? Just shut up. Tell me. You're like, if you pitch bad tonight, it's my fault. I said, dude, get out of here, man. What are you talking about? Like, he goes, the mound looks terrible. You were like I said, Shane, it's fine. I ain't worried about that. Like, I'm going to be fine. Yeah. So that night goes out, right? And it's like, I think it's like a 0-0 game going into like through the fifth, and we get into the sixth, and I give up a leadoff double, right? And everybody on the bench tells me later on, right? Especially Gary was like, yo, Shane was freaking out, right? You get to the 6th inning and he started and you gave a leadoff double and you were like, oh, there it is. Like, here it is.
Yeah.
Like, this is not me. I end up punching out the next 3 guys.
Yeah.
Then we put up like a 4 spot, right? I throw the 7th, we're good, right? The game ends, I strike the last guy out and finish the game. You were the first guy to meet me out on the field, right? You kind of, chest slap, give me a hug, and you said, yo, you picked me up today, right?
Yeah.
And it was real. Like, it was real. Like, you really were like, man, you picked me up, because if we would have lost, it was my fault. Like, that's how bought in you were to that. Your role was to make sure the mound was as good as possible so I could perform. And because you didn't do up to standard of what you did, that it was going to be your fault if I didn't perform well, right? Like, that is a real story. Like, tell me, obviously you remember this.
Yeah,
right?
like, here's the thing is Brian remembers details better than I remember details, but 100%.
Like, you remember how you felt.
And I used to always say out loud, like, treat the mound how you want it to treat you. You know what I mean? Like, if you treat the mound good, it's going to be good back to you. And, like, I don't know where that came from or where I got that from, but that's how I really felt. I mean, but here's the thing. And I still kind of feel that way.
Because that was your role at a young age.
Yeah.
So you invested 100%. Yourself, and you, like, built a relationship with that role of being the best at doing the mound.
They're not going to suck because the mound sucks. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, that was basically where I was at with it. So maybe it was a way for me to, like, feel important or whatever. I don't know, but that's what it was. It is what that is. Like that. And I took a lot of pride in that.
And that's still to this day, right?
I still kind of like. I don't get to do the mounds anymore, but I went from doing the mounds to anytime somebody's on a mound, I have to sit there and watch.
But here's the thing: you're what? 11 years into professional baseball, right? 7 years in big leagues, right?
13.
Right.
2009.
Every off season, wherever I've been coaching, you've come and thrown bullpens.
Yeah.
And you don't let anybody do the mound. You do it. And every time the kids or whoever we're coaching with is like, like, oh, you don't need to do the mound, right? You're like, you're the big leaguer. Here's the regular. And you're like, no, like, I'm better than you at this. Like, and I did it. I want to do it. Like, right. And that's where it's just like, look how it still takes, you've still carried that with you, right? And like, that's where, for me, being able to, like, be a teammate with you and then just kind of be along as a little bit of a spectator on your journey on the inside, like, you still kept all those things.
Yeah.
Like, you still, like, you threw a bullpen this week, right?
Yeah.
You do the mound afterwards?
I didn't, but BA does a really good job.
Yeah.
But I did feel bad because he was fixing them and I hadn't thrown yet, and I had to run over there and, hey, BA, like, I still got to throw a bullpen, my bad, Like, I know you're, because he takes pride in it too, so I get it. Yeah. And he was halfway done, and I'm like, hey, my bad, man. I haven't thrown yet. I hope that doesn't mess everything up, But he does a really good job taking care of it, so I haven't been taking care of it, but you already know.
But it's the same thing as a
But
team.
when the kids are doing the game mound, sometimes I'm watching, and I'm like, I can't even get started because they'll never understand where I'm coming from, and we'll be out here all day, like. I want to do it for them because it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not even close to perfect. It's just like where you land is just not soft, but it's not level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's obviously not soft, but it's obviously also not level. But I help them in other ways now because they listen.
Yeah. So and that's the thing that I think is that's the better stuff, because I'm sure everybody asks you, right, wherever you go, oh, what was that made you the big leagues? What happened? What made you throw harder? What did all those things? And all of those things are more of a byproduct of the real fertilizer was how you view things, the smallest details of, like, the mound and, like.
And the thing about, like, the whole journey, you want to talk about just the whole journey to the big leagues, like the amount of people that you encounter, they're all from different backgrounds. You're going to play with guys that were the best player in their state their whole life, and you're going to play with guys like me who still aren't the best player in their state. You know what I mean? So, like, you see that there's so many people trying to accomplish the same goal from so many different backgrounds with so many different talent levels, so many different mindsets that, like, you have to hone into something. You know what I mean? And you give me crap for it all the time. Like, every offseason I have a new plan.
Something different.
But I always have a plan.
Every time. Well,
I always have a plan. I always execute whatever that plan is. So it's always going to be a different plan.
So now at this point in your career, and you have been since you've been a professional, you get to create your own role.
Yeah,
right? You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, though. So that's where it's like I look back when you were a sophomore and the role that was given to you was to take care of the mound, and you were all in on it and took pride in it.
Yeah.
And one off season, you're like, yo, mass to throw gas. I'm going to get huge. And you put on like 40 pounds that off season, right? Then the next off season, you're like, yo, like, everybody says be as flexible as a noodle. I am, except the uncooked one.
Yeah,
I break. I'm sitting here hanging out with you at the house, and you're sitting on the inversion table,
Yeah.
right? Upside down. Just
Yeah.
because another off season, you're like, yo, I'm a vegan,
Yeah.
right? And it's like whatever it was, you were like so all in.
Yeah,
So
for
it's the
sure.
same thing back to when you were a sophomore and the role was given to you. Now you're just at a point of career, and I always talk about with players is like, you're like in the journey, you're driving like the vehicle of your career. You got to drive.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, it's just like anything. Like when you're 10 years old and you tell someone to drive a truck, like that's not okay, right?
Yeah.
So at the beginning, like, I'm driving your vehicle, you in the back seat, and you
Yeah.
need to listen to the conversations, and then you need to get old enough to where you graduate to the front seat, and then your front seat, we have a little more conversations about some things, and then you're gonna have your permit, right, to where you're gonna drive, but I gotta sit there and drive with you, and you're still
Yeah.
gonna listen to me, and then you're gonna get your license, and you're gonna be driving the car by yourself. But I'm a phone call away,
Yeah.
right? And then it becomes that, like, you got a car, you got multiple cars with your career, and I just hope that you still just want to talk to me, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to have control over your career, and
sure.
that's what the evolution happens as a player. As a sophomore, when you're told to rake the mound, you're not only in the backseat, you in the trunk, right? You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
And then it's like, as you get to college, as you get to pro ball, now all of a sudden you have to drive yours. So
Yeah.
now look how you created roles and goals for yourself, and you still have the same level of conviction with them, right? And you know what? Like, every one of those off seasons, was it any of the thing, whatever the theme was that made you perform better that year? Who can say?
Who knows?
But I know that your conviction towards it,
Yeah, that's
right,
what matters the most.
is matter most, because now if you have conviction towards that, you're gonna have conviction towards everything that you do.
Yeah, I
right?
think the number one thing, I say the number one thing, one of the main things is, like, have a plan and then execute the plan. And just executing whatever plan that is, even if your plan today is to go to the grocery store, okay, because you need broccoli. If you go to the grocery store and you forget the broccoli, when you get home, you're like, bad day today.
Yeah.
I forgot to get, you know what I mean? Like, I forgot to get the broccoli.
That was the whole point.
That was the whole point why I was supposed to go to the grocery store, and I forgot to get the broccoli. I got rice instead, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? So, like, have a plan, execute the plan. At the end of that day, your brain is going to feel successful with no negative thoughts.
Even if, like, the success isn't there, right? Because
No,
it's
the success is executing.
yeah.
That's it.
Because I actually had a talk with a parent the other day, right? And they're asking, I was telling them, they're like, hey, my kid's not performing. I said, well, it's because he's got no plan. Like, he's got none, right? And he's like, well, what does he need to do to get one? I said, you have to understand that, like, if I told you we're going to Atlanta, okay, right? And, like, you asked me, okay, how do I have to get there? Well, like, we have to have a starting point.
Yeah.
And until the player has a plan, and even if the plan fails, it gives us a starting point, right? So on that same analogy, it's like, you got to get to Atlanta, and I don't know where we're starting. I don't know where to tell you north, south, east, or west.
Right.
If you tell me, all right, we're starting in, New York, then I'm like, oh, we got to go south, right?
Yeah.
If you tell me we're starting in Miami, I'm like, oh, we got to go north, right?
sure.
But you got to have a starting point is what it is. So the only way you have a starting point is you throw yourself out there and you see, did I get burned? Did I not get burned? How bad did I get burned, right? And then you start to be able to go from there. But you have to throw yourself in the fire to have an idea of where you're at, to be able to now understand what's the path on where I want to get to.
For sure. And now you're in the car, you're in New York, and you're going to Atlanta. Like, what if you only knew that you're in the car in New York? Like, you don't know the destination yet. You know what I mean? You can go as fast as you want in the car, but if you don't have a destination, where are you going?
So that's that.
And to go on top of that quick before I forget to tell you this, is recently I learned that sometimes you get to the destination and you get out of the car and nobody cares. Nobody cares that you made it to your destination. So we got to stop looking at them as destinations and goals and more checkpoints, right? Because, like, once you get there, then what? You're done. You know what I mean? It goes back to, like, when you were 8 to 15, how many times did somebody ask you, hey, man, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
How come nobody asked me
I
that
can tell you
anymore?
it wasn't owning my own baseball facility.
Yeah, but
wasn't.
how come nobody asked you that now? You're done growing up?
Nah,
You're not allowed to want to be something no more?
Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm 33 years old. I still have a lot of goals
Yeah.
of what I want to be when I grow up. You know, like, it's a process. It's a never-ending process, and those goals and those destinations are really just checkpoints.
So it's what I'm getting from that, right, is that it's just like you're saying, like, destinations are ceilings, and why are we putting ceilings on
Bingo.
ourselves?
Like,
right?
have a destination, but understand that, like,
That's not a final.
That's not a
destination.
forever home.
Yeah, it's a checkpoint. Like
it's a
you said, right?
checkpoint.
Yeah.
There's going to be another destination after that destination, and you can't put so much emphasis on the one destination for other people either. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't go to Atlanta because that's where you think
Well, and that's
everyone
where this
wants
is
to go.
actually where I was going, right? Like to a slightly different branch.